Miss Hiller? The water's boiling.
Hello! Ah! Yes, dear?
I take sugar in my tea.
Oh, your tea! Oh, tea.
Could you make me a woman?
Honey, I'm so happy. Oh, come here.
I knew you'd understand.
Such a shanda. I should never buy Gribbinus from a moil. It's so chewy.
When people think of Robin Williams, the first images that come to mind are his boundless energy, those lightning-fast impressions, and his ability to light up a room with laughter. But for those who worked closely with him, especially Sally Field, there was another side to Robin, one that the public rarely got to see. On the surface, he was the life of the party on set, cracking jokes between takes, improvising lines that turned a good scene into a magical one, and keeping everyone, from co-stars to crew members, in fits of laughter. But behind that comedic brilliance was a deeply sensitive, attentive, and emotionally intelligent man. When Sally Field first met Robin on the set of Mrs. Doubtfire in 1993, she knew he was more than just a funny man. He was an artist. They weren't just playing characters. They were telling a story about family, love, and personal pain. And Robin's ability to jump between laughter and raw emotion amazed her. He would start the day by filming a few takes exactly as written, honoring the script and the director's vision. But after that, he would let loose, becoming an unstoppable force of spontaneity. Voices, gestures, and expressions that no one had planned for, yet everyone grew to depend on. For most actors, this would have been overwhelming, maybe even disruptive. But not for Sally. She didn't try to compete. She listened, responded, adapted. She let his chaos shape her calm, and the contrast between their energies created scenes that felt alive. Their chemistry wasn't flash. It was real. It came from two people who respected the craft, respected each other, and understood that storytelling isn't just about what's on the page, but what happens in those in-between spaces. Sally wasn't just impressed with Robin's genius, she was moved by his kindness, his awareness, and how he made the whole set feel like home. Director Chris Columbus even adapted the shooting style to keep up with Robin's unpredictability, setting up multiple cameras to catch moments no one could. Script, and through it all, Sally saw Robin for who he truly was, not just the performer, but the protector. There was something about the way he paid attention. He noticed people. He made everyone feel seen, from fellow stars to the quietest crew members. In the corner, that attention wasn't just professional, it was personal, it was real. And one day, during a moment of private grief, Sally would experience just how deep that kindness ran. It was supposed to be just another day on set. The crew was preparing to shoot an emotional courtroom scene. One of the many dramatic moments in Mrs. Doubtfire, Sally Field was in her trailer. Dressed and ready, mentally preparing to play Miranda, the conflicted ex-wife caught between her children and her former husband, now disguised as a nanny. But behind the calm exterior, Sally was crumbling. That morning, she had received news that her father had passed away. He had suffered a stroke years earlier and had been in a nursing facility. And even though his passing wasn't unexpected, it hit her harder than she could have imagined. Still, she chose to show up. She was a seasoned actress, a two-time Oscar winner, someone who had always taken her work seriously. Crying in front of the cameras wasn't an option, at least that's what she believed. So she walked onto set, carrying a storm of grief behind her eyes, trying to keep it buried beneath the performance. But Robin noticed. People, amid all the distractions of a movie set, he saw her, not her character, not the costume, not the professional trying to push through. He saw Sally, the human being in pain. Without making a scene, without calling attention to himself, he gently pulled her aside and asked, "Are you okay?" That simple question broke the dam. She told him the truth. "My father just died." And without hesitation, Robin sprang into action. He wasn't just the lead actor on the project, he was also one of the producers. He had the authority to shift schedules, and he used it. He went straight to the director, Chris Columbus, and insisted they rearrange the shoot. "Can we do this without Sally today? She needs to go." It wasn't a request. It was a quiet demand born out of love. Sally left the set, and they filmed around her scenes for the rest of the day. Later, when she recalled the moment, she didn't speak of a grand gesture. She spoke of stillness. Robin standing beside her, not saying much, just being there. She remembered his eyes, filled with understanding. She remembered how he gave her permission to stop pretending, to stop performing, and to be a daughter in mourning. That was the kind of man Robin was. Not just a comedian, not just a talent, but a deeply empathetic soul who read rooms like scripts, who always knew the right thing to do, even when there were no words. And for Sally, that memory has never faded, stayed with her long after. The cameras stopped rolling long after the press tours ended, and even long after Robin's own tragic passing. She once said, "He should be growing old like me." There's heartbreak in that sentence, but also reverence for a man who changed her life. Not with a performance, but with a gesture of love. Robin Williams was, above all, kind. He made people laugh, yes, but more than that, he made people feel. And in that quiet moment, in the shadow of grief, he gave Sally Field a gift far greater than anything a script could offer, the gift of compassion. When she needed it most, what began as a friendship between two actors on a film set evolved into a lasting emotional bond, rooted in small, deeply human gestures, moments of laughter shared between takes, and quiet comfort offered in times of grief. Sally Field has never forgotten the moment Robin Williams stepped in when she was overwhelmed by the news of her father's death. It wasn't something flashy or performative. He didn't do it for attention or applause. He did it instinctively, from the depths of a heart that understood pain in ways few others did. That was Robin being Robin. He wasn't just a performer, he was a deeply intuitive person who moved through the world with empathy as his compass. Others who worked closely with him, actors like Al Pacino and Ben Stiller, echoed this truth. Behind the dazzling comic timing and the seemingly endless stream of impressions was a man who felt everything deeply. Robin had a gift that went beyond comedy. He could sense pain, joy, or tension even when it was unspoken. Sally once said that most people only saw the chaos, the comedy, the whirlwind energy. But those closest to him saw the stillness, the kindness, the gentle presence that made him so beloved. That is what made Robin Williams irreplaceable. His humor made the world laugh, but his humanity made people feel loved. He could walk into a room and read its emotional temperature within seconds, and instead of performing, he responded. He connected, not just through jokes, but through his willingness to show up for others in real, heartfelt ways. On every set, in every room, he left behind more than just great scenes. He left behind people who had been lifted by his presence. He brought joy to strangers, turned silence into comfort, and made the people in his orbit feel understood. That's what Sally Field remembers. It's not just the funny voices or the one-liners, but the love behind the laughter. So while the world might remember the characters and the noise, those who truly knew him, like Sally, remember the quiet strength, the kind that doesn't ask for anything, the kind that just shows up. And yet, even as he gave so much to others, very few ever saw the internal battle Robin was fighting. Behind the joy was a shadow. Behind the warmth was a pain he rarely voiced. It's time to look at the part of his life that most never knew, the part that speaks not just to his suffering, but to the tragic beauty of a man who kept giving even as he faded. As Robin approached the final year of his life, something inside him began to dim. The energy that had once fueled his performances, the rapid-fire wit that had become his trademark, and even the light in his eyes all began to fade in ways only those closest to him noticed. It started subtly. After the cancellation of the Crazy Ones, a show he had hoped would reignite his television career, he was left feeling defeated. To the outside world, it may have just looked like another series cut short. But to Robin, it felt like a door closing. A door he had always assumed would stay open. Around the same time, his personal life was shifting. It had recently gone through a painful divorce, and although he had remarried, the emotional weight of past failures and the challenge of starting anew were difficult to carry. He was trying to find footing in a life that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Then, in May of 2014, came a diagnosis that rocked him to the core: Parkinson's disease. For someone who thrived on spontaneity, speed, and expression, the idea of slowly losing control over his movements, his memory, and his voice was terrifying. Parkinson's doesn't just rob a person of physical agility, chips away at the very essence of identity. For Robin, that identity was tied to performance, to improvisation, to being in the moment. And this diagnosis felt like the beginning of the end. But even that devastating news was only part of the story. After his death, it was revealed that Robin had been misdiagnosed. What he had been truly battling was Lewy body dementia, rare and aggressive brain disease that affects cognition, behavior, and movement. It causes hallucinations, paranoia, and emotional volatility, and is often misunderstood even by medical professionals. Robin didn't know what was happening to him. One day he would feel like himself. The next, he would be gripped by confusion and fear. It was a silent, invisible war inside his own mind. Friends began to notice his unease. He would forget things, seem distant, or become anxious without reason. His hands trembled. His voice sometimes faltered. He still smiled for the cameras, still tried to be Robin Williams for the world, but inside he was falling apart, and tragically, he didn't know how to ask for help, or even what kind of help he needed. As the illness progressed, Robin became more isolated. He tried to continue working, desperate to hold on to the part of himself that had always made sense, the performer, the artist, the giver. But the disease was relentless. It clouded his thoughts, hijacked his emotions, and pulled him deeper into confusion. It wasn't just sadness. It was something darker, something that stripped away hope. His wife, Susan Schneider, later described it as the terrorist inside my husband's brain. One moment, he would be laughing. The next, completely lost. And for someone who had spent his life connecting with people, losing that sense of self was unbearable. He began to withdraw, not out of indifference, but because he couldn't trust his own mind anymore. And still, he didn't want to burden others. That was the cruelest part. His empathy, the very thing that made him extraordinary, kept him silent. On August 11th, 2014, the world lost Robin Williams. He died by suicide in his home in California, and the shock was immediate. The man who had made the world laugh was suddenly gone, and the grief was overwhelming. But in the days and weeks that followed, something else emerged, a collective reckoning. For many, this was the moment they truly saw how deep mental illness can run and how well it can hide behind smiles. Robin's death sparked conversations that had long been overdue. It forced people to look closer, to ask harder questions, to acknowledge that even those who seemed the happiest might be carrying unbearable pain. For Sally Field and others who loved him, it was a painful realization that the same kindness Robin gave so freely to everyone else, he rarely extended to himself. He uplifted everyone around him, but when it came time to ask for help, he stayed quiet. Even in death, Robin Williams taught the world something vital. Check in on your friends. Pay attention. Be there, because sometimes even the brightest light is flickering in silence. The grief over Robin's passing was unlike anything Hollywood had seen in years. It wasn't just the end of a career. It felt like the end of something much more personal. There was a sense that the world had lost a companion, a healer, a friend, and the tributes came in waves from every corner of the globe. One of the most powerful came from Christopher Reeve's Storia, a reminder of how far Robin would go to bring someone comfort. Dressed as a doctor, Robin had walked into his paralyzed friend's hospital room and delivered a performance so ridiculous that Reeve laughed for the first time since his accident. It wasn't just a joke, it was a miracle. That's who Robin was, gave people permission to feel joy again. Colleagues like Jeff Bridges, Billy Crystal, and Whoopi Goldberg didn't just mourn him, they honored him. Billy, during the Emmys, struggled to hold back tears as he described Robin not only as a comedic genius, but as the greatest friend you could ever imagine. Whoopi called his death a loss of self, a missing part of her soul. Even President Obama released a statement that captured the world's sentiment. Robin Williams was an artist who touched every part of the human experience. Not just through the characters he played, but through the way he made people feel. Online, fans shared stories, artwork, and tearful memories. People spoke of how his films had helped them through dark times, how his voice had brought joy to their childhoods, how his humor had been a lifeline. One woman wrote that she pulled over to the side of the road when she heard the news, sobbing as though she had lost a member of her family. And in many ways, she had. Robin wasn't just an actor, he was part of people's lives. His words were stitched into their memories. His laughter echoed in their living rooms. He was a reminder that joy and pain often exist together, and that both deserve to be felt. And today, years later, Robin Williams continues to live on. It's not just in the films and shows he made, but in the moments he gave people, those scenes you return to when the world feels too heavy, those lines that make you smile on your worst days. His role as the genie in Aladdin remains iconic, not just because it was funny, but because it was full of heart. Kids still watch it, not knowing who Robin Williams was, but feeling the warmth he left behind. In Mrs. Doubtfire, he showed that love is worth fighting for, even if it means putting on a mask. That performance made people laugh until they cried, and then cry until they healed. In Dead Poets Society, he reminded us to seize the day, to speak our truth, to live fully. In Good Will Hunting, he showed that listening, truly listening, is a rare and powerful act of love. That is the legacy of Robin Williams. Not the fame, not the fortune, but the empathy, the truth, the connection. For Sally Field, his memory isn't frozen in a roll or a red carpet, it lives in a single moment of kindness. When her world stopped, he didn't speak. He just held her hand. And that, more than any performance, is what defines a life well lived. What are your thoughts on what Sally shared in Robin's kindness, his legacy, and the struggle he hid so well? We'd love to hear from you. Share your reflections in the comments below.